Webb telescope. You know the ones that are bright, they're HD, and they're packed with what looks like 1,000,000 glimmering stars and galaxies just crammed into one photo. It just looks teeming with stuff. But if you'll allow me to blow your mind, despite the pictures, our universe is shockingly empty. But before I get to that, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Caleb Sakala, and I'm a past student from Chengelo. Mrs. Chinga didn't actually mention that I actually grew up here, all the way from grade 1 until Form 5. My family lived on campus, my closest friends lived on campus, and the reason I'm here is because there's something in what's happened to me that might be useful for you, because I'm certainly returning to this place a different man than I left. One embarrassing fact from my secondary school days is I once got in trouble for writing a scathing letter to the principal saying that a teacher wrongfully punished me and one day I'm going to be rich and famous and I'm going to come back and bulldoze the school and fire everyone. Okay. Suffice to say, I've had a change of heart about the whole bulldozing thing. I do think it's important to share that though, because as I tell my story, I don't want you to see me as somebody who was an exception. I am through and through one of you. Today, I'm a man who graduated university with a perfect record for 4 years, got a role right out of university at a European design and technology company that has worked with Forbes, Visa, HBO, and the World Health Organization. I'm the lead engineer on a social media marketing product that powers multi-million-dollar tech companies, and I have even been personally commended by Bill Gates' daughter. But okay. But that started here. And my story today starts with talking about the entire universe. See, I was saying that the universe seems so full in the pictures, but that gives us the wrong mental model. It's actually pretty empty. And I don't mean empty in terms of life, I mean empty in general. And to realize why this is the case, you have to realize how big it is. And trust me, this will be important. So expansion measurements tell us that the observable universe is 93 billion light years wide. That's enough to confuse anybody. About 46 billion light years in every direction, give or take a couple billion. Now, if you took the entire observable universe and you squeezed it down to the size of Africa, and then you took every single thing in the universe, and by that I mean every planet, every cloud of gas, every asteroid, everything you could see in those pictures of space you see, and then you just mash that all into one rock, that rock wouldn't even be the size of my pinky. Said differently, if you took the whole universe and squeezed it into a ShopRite box, then every moon and star and planet and galaxy out there combined into one would be smaller than one atom in that box. We live in an empty box. And yet it doesn't feel that way, does it? I graduated in 2020 as one of the top students in my class, and yet graduation for me felt a lot like realizing that the opportunity-filled universe I had spent my entire secondary life staring out into was actually dark and ultimately empty. More empty than I thought, at least. You see, I couldn't afford university. I could barely afford secondary school too. I was on a 95% scholarship here and I left with debts to pay even then. So while my friends crossed over into their new lives, accepting offers at my dream universities, I slipped into a bitter abyss. I said, if I can't go to university, fine. I don't need university. I talked my way into a job from a stranger who owned a food truck in town. The deal was, I cook burgers for people who walk past the food truck, and I take home 200 kwacha per month as a salary. Mind you, I'd never even cooked burgers before, but I did it. And every night I would buy bundles and log onto Instagram on the iPod Touch my friend lent me and see all my friends doing way better than me. And with a guilty feeling, I just feel like it isn't fair. I think, why is this happening to me? You know, I performed well in school. I even did better academically in my final year than I'd ever done in any year of secondary school. And the reward for it all was the humiliation ritual of waking up at 8 and carrying my disposable aprons to town, hoping nobody I know will recognize me working a dead-end job. Retrospectively, the job was the least of my humiliation, because there would come a month when the food truck wasn't doing well, sales were down, ingredients were going bad, And when I presented the monthly report to my boss, I was accused of falsifying the finances for my own gain. I write down everything. And when I showed him the records going back months to prove my innocence, he said, "This is nonsense. You just made it up. You're a thief and you planned everything." And ultimately, I was told that I wouldn't even get the 200 kwacha for that month unless I spoke to his fiancée, who I didn't know and had never met, and admitted to her that I was a thief and a liar, and begged her to give me the money out of mercy or honesty because he had no mercy left for me. And when I refused to do that, he fired me that very evening. It was raining the evening I got fired. The pathetic fallacy is insane. I walked home with my disposable apron still on, mud and rain squelching in my cold shoes, just thinking to myself, how on earth did I go from being a top student on track to be something and do great things in the world to being treated like I'm worth less than the muck underneath somebody's shoe? I was left with nothing to do but to just ask God why this was happening to me. I found myself questioning if there even was a God. Like, am I even talking to anyone right now? Because for the millionth time, why does it feel like the events of my life are totally random? I went from asking God what is happening to me to asking if there even is a God. And I distinctly recall it being past midnight on a weekday, and I, still with that iPod Touch, searched, does God exist on YouTube? 3 words. That's it. But I think this is where things would begin to change. Because that question would open up a world of discussions about God that I'd never even heard. Musings on God written by the forefathers of science, modern arguments for the existence of God from a cosmological perspective, and suddenly I felt the weight of what it truly means to believe that God is real. I was struck with the blinding realization that my life was so full of dread and disappointment and the thought that I'll not live up to other people's expectations of me. But if God is real in the realest sense, that anything can be real, then the importance of everything else pales in comparison. What eyes does one look upon the sorrows of not going to university with when those same eyes have seen eternal life? There's a Bible verse, 2 Corinthians 4 verse 17, that says, "For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory." And in that moment, I realized the impermanence of my present affliction as I understood the scale of the life it exists in. When I was a child, one time I cried when I walked into my dad's room and I saw an empty tin of Pringles. My dad's actually here. But on that day, I was distraught. I was hurt. I was betrayed. And I still remember it now only because of how shocked I was. He was not allowed to have Pringles without me. But now, it just seems so silly to be upset about that. And I started to wonder if, in the light of eternity, I might be like a child right now. I started to wonder if eternity exists, will I even remember what it felt like to feel bad about my plans for university? I started to question what it really means to be a somebody, what it means to make it in life. Because if God is real, then what it means to succeed in life might not necessarily be what the world had defined as success for me. I was struck with the blinding realization that I had spent so much time crushed by the anxiety of someone somewhere wondering what happened to me and why I was so behind in life, when the truth is, I don't have to be a somebody. Not in the way that the world thinks. Waiting for me at the end of it all was an epiphany. If God is real, and I don't mean passively real, somebody told you so you just take it as a given. I mean, if God, in the sense that is so difficult to imagine, this maximally great being that is the source of existence itself, exists, then the purpose of my life can't be anything that doesn't involve him. And every time I was worried about university, I was really worried that I wouldn't be a success in life. But the mind-bending implication of everything I've just said is if your life's success is oriented around the continual knowledge of God, then it doesn't matter much whether you're successful in any other definition of success. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, whether you're famous or unknown, whether you're loved or persecuted, or whether you lived up to what people thought of you or not. Because your success is not measured in dollars, houses, likes on social media, or other people's approval. You gain a new definition of success that is infinitely more valuable than any success the world can give you, because you can't even work for it. What I had just discovered was identity. The kind of identity that allows you to rest in God. I don't have to be a somebody, not in the way the world defines it for me. My life didn't get materially better after, but it got qualitatively better. I didn't have a job, so I spent most of my days learning about Christianity and world religions in general, like I'd never done before. The days faded into each other and I became content with my simple life. I used the last of my money to buy a tiny MTN cell phone and moved on. Whatever blessings came my way would be received with gratitude. Until then, God is enough. What I didn't know was that God was about to take me to the next level. Because I received a phone call from a friend of mine. He was in a lower form. I don't even know how he got my number. He said, "Caleb, you've been offline everywhere for months. What's going on?" And I hesitated, wondering if I should tell him the truth. Because he was in a lower form. I felt that fear of everybody coming back. Like, what if he tells everybody, And then I said, you know what? Whatever. He asked, I'll tell him the truth. And I'm happy that I did, because this friend was about to change my life. There's a famous storytelling pattern called the hero's journey. And the hero's journey story pattern has 3 parts: departure, initiation, and return. In the departure stage, the hero lives an ordinary life until a call to adventure disrupts it. They may hesitate or refuse at first, but they usually get pushed forward by someone else. And then comes initiation, where the hero crosses into an unfamiliar world, faces trials, allies, and enemies, and eventually confronts some kind of crisis. And then there's the return, where the hero comes back transformed, bringing some benefit or wisdom to their community. I was living an ordinary life, but after that call with my friend, he told me that his dad could get me a job, and I would be moving to Lusaka. Lusaka was indeed an unfamiliar world, and I was an unfamiliar person. I thought I knew what I wanted to do when I graduated. I was going to go to Oxford, or Stanford, or Princeton, or Cambridge, and I was going to study mechanical engineering. But now, months later, I was sure of the opposite. I was sure that I didn't want to go to university. I told myself that I don't need university, even though I really meant to say that I didn't want to get my hopes up one more time. Because university meant circumstances control my life. My past controls my life. And I wanted control over my own life. My renewed sense of faith did come in handy in workplace debates with my superior, who was an atheist. Because of that preparation I went through, I could hold my ground. My renewed sense of faith came in handy when I had to stand for what I believe in, even in the pressure of colleagues to fall into a lifestyle that would only hurt me in the long term. And I've learned that the long term is so important. It's like life is a painting, but you live it one brush stroke at a time. And certain things only start to come together as the whole painting comes together. Because while I was at work, I discovered that I don't even like mechanical engineering. I just felt like I had to choose something to pick for university when I graduated, and mechanical just seemed the most in reach. And even though I almost dropped computer science in secondary school, I found myself willingly spending entire nights coding formulas for my workmates in Excel. I was discovering new formulas and innovating new ways to make everyone's life better with automation. My workmates loved it, and I was falling in love with developing software. And today I think, had I gone to university at the time that I wanted to, it would have been a different story. But now, I had something I genuinely felt passionate about. And then, I got another call from a friend. Different one this time. He said, "Caleb, you've been offline everywhere for months. What's going on?" Because even though I had a job now, I was still hiding. I didn't want people to know that I was working for my friend's dad and say, "Oh, you're not going to university," and pity me for this kind of thing. So I hesitated, wondering if I should tell the truth to a guy who probably wasn't going to be of much help, even if he knew the truth. I felt that fear of everybody coming back, like, "Oh, what if he tells everybody?" But then I said, you know what? Whatever. He asked, I'll give him the truth. And I'm happy that I did, because this friend was about to change my life. He got me back in touch with the mum of another friend of ours, who I know as Miss Dugan, who joined forces with the owner of Musa Biscuits to agree to sponsor me when needed in university if I could get a scholarship. And all of a sudden, there was hope again. Because with backing behind me and a new direction on where I wanted to be and what I wanted to study, I started applying for universities again. And the Bible says in Romans 8, verse 28, "And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." And I know this to be true because I have not gotten everything I wanted in life. But every step of the way, God has taken what I wanted and given me what I didn't know I needed. February 1st, 2022, I got an email that said, "We would like to congratulate you on your acceptance to Eastern Mediterranean University. Please note that EMU International Scholarship Evaluation Committee has decided to award you a 100% scholarship." And this time, I did know that God was about to take me to another level. I'd already moved so far past flipping burgers, but I hadn't been at school for so long that I forgot how to hold a pen. I didn't even remember any math I'd done in my final year. But despite this, by the end of my first semester in university, I had achieved an academic milestone I had never even achieved in all my years of high school. A perfect GPA. It was unbelievable, at least to me. And it was only up from there. Second semester, perfect GPA. And I was awarded a new scholarship where I'd be getting paid monthly by the government. Third semester, perfect GPA. My university recognizes me as the top performing student in my department and begins paying me $2,000 every time I stay at the top. Fourth semester, perfect GPA. I begin working remotely as one of the youngest and only African member of a team of engineers who left Facebook and Google to create what was at the time one of the world's first AI coding tools. I begin as a volunteer, but one day the CEO calls me and says, "Caleb, you're doing great. It's not fair we're not paying you. Give me a number and it's done." Fifth semester, perfect GPA. Sixth semester, perfect GPA. You cannot lose when it's your time to win. At the end of my third year, the CEO of the company I worked at calls me, offers me stocks in the company, promotes me to a lead engineer, and reorganizes significant portions of the company's operations around my university availability. Seventh semester, perfect GPA. And by this point, my friends are coming to me often and asking me how I can be so peaceful when I'm performing at such a level, when I'm working a job and doing university and doing all these things. And I tell them, because I'm not defined by what I'm going to get on that test tomorrow. I see my education the way I see my life. I don't have to be somebody. And that means I don't have to be a high-performing student either. I succeed because I'm able to. I succeed because I'm working at it as though I'm working to please God and not man. I interpret the whole situation through Christianity-colored glasses because in the same sense that the purpose of life is to know God, the purpose of an education to me is to know the content. And in the same sense that regardless of if I've succeeded in the eyes of man, I can succeed in the eyes of God. Regardless of if I've succeeded in the eyes of my lecturer in the exam tomorrow, I can know the content. I don't go into the test worrying if I'll get things right. I go into the test knowing I don't have to be right. I don't have to get an A on this. The simple fact that I've spent the hours to actually understand what is being taught to me means that I have successfully received an education regardless of what the test result says. The test doesn't decide my success. I go into every test knowing I have already succeeded in the way that I define success for me. Eighth semester, perfect GPA. And at the end of my university days, I stood, someone who once said he would never go to university, now honored amongst all my peers to give the commencement speech at the graduation ceremony. Before I stepped onto the stage, I said a prayer asking God if he could tell my mother to look at me from heaven for a second because I was about to shine. I gave that speech and it was everything I thought it would be. And today, I look back at my life and the bad days feel like a distant dream. The painting is coming to life. I see how everything that happened here was preparation. Remember what I told you about the hero's journey? You know, the 3-stage process, departure, initiation, return? This right here to me is my return to where it all began, at least for this chapter. And the wisdom I hope to leave with all of you are these 3 things. Lesson 1. Life is a painting, but you only live it one painstaking brushstroke at a time. Losing my provisional offers for mechanical engineering at the universities I applied to, flipping burgers for 200 kwacha, being called a liar and fired the same day I begged for money I had already earned. From inside those moments, I could not see anything but darkness. And like Job in the Bible, I had my complaint ready. God, if you are real, why are you happening to me? And just if you aren't familiar with the story of Job, Job loses everything, his children, his health, his wealth, and he goes from trusting in God to at one point demanding an answer from God. And when God finally speaks, he doesn't give Job an explanation. He asks Job a question. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Can you bind the stars? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Have you walked in the depths of the sea? Chapter after chapter of this, God's answer to why is this happening to me is essentially, you are looking at one splotch, but I am painting something you cannot even see the edges of. Lesson 2. You don't have to be a somebody. The universe looks full. Those deep space photographs look packed with stars. And the life the world is selling you looks packed too. The car, pickup, the name of the university, the title, the salary, but you squeeze it all down and there is almost nothing there. You could hold the whole thing in a box and find less than a single atom inside. I spent so long crushed by the weight of who I was supposed to become, terrified that someone somewhere was wondering what happened to me. But at the end of it all was not a bigger version of that weight. It was permission to put it down. If you ask me, the purpose of life is to know God, and you can do that whether you're rich or poor, famous or unknown, and whether you live in Lusaka or if you're stuck in Bokushi flipping burgers in a food truck. And lesson 3, you're not finished yet. I was one of the top students, and even I didn't know what to do when I graduated, and when I had the time to think, I changed my mind. And you will change your mind about what you want, about who you are, about what matters, at least one of those things. And that's not a failure, that's the design. I sat where you are sitting today, convinced that I was going to go to Oxford to study mechanical engineering. I was wrong about the school, I was wrong about the subject, I was wrong about the country, I was wrong about all of it. And thank God I was. Even though I use the hero's journey metaphor to describe this moment, I don't stand here speaking to you as somebody who has completed life. I'm going through it just as you are. A new chapter begins. I'm not finished, and neither are you. Before I bring this to a close, I'd like to pray for all of you. So could we bow our heads and pray? Dear God,